let's talk about the budget. It's coming up in a week on Wednesday, and we've heard so many rumours about what's in, what's not in the budget. Is there a mansion tax? The income tax going to go up? Apparently not. A milkshake tax is later today, but we are going to also see some stealth taxes in terms of your income tax ban. Well, let's talk about it all with independent economist Julia Jessup. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. Right, first of all, let's talk about the income tax. There was a talk that there was going to be an income tax rise of 2 pence in the pound, but also a national insurance cut for 2 pence in the pound. So the average worker wouldn't actually see difference, but it would hit pensioners with older people. We're now told that's not happening. Was it ever seriously on the cards?
Oh, I'm absolutely certain it was. I mean, the newspapers were widely briefed that this was a proposal that the Chancellor had submitted to the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility.
Yes, they didn't make it up.
No. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And all the signals a few weeks ago were that the Labour Party was preparing to break the manifesto commitments, and we had that so-called scene-setting speech from Rachel Reeves that was clearly designed to do that. So that plan was real and has been dropped. There's some attempt to explain this away in terms of some better forecast from the Office for Budget Responsibility.
It's a load of nonsense.
That's what I would politely at this time in the morning call nonsense. Any good news would already have been factored into the forecast before the plan to raise income tax was included. So it was inevitably about the fears of the political fallout, and that was certainly the views of the markets on Friday. So there was a big jump in the cost of government borrowing, because markets don't like this uncertainty. They think the government isn't serious about raising tax, let alone cutting spending.
So this is the key thing. This is the market. It's the gilt market. It's the 10-year yield. Is that it? So basically, this is the sort of debt that the government sells, and people buy it, and then they agree to pay a certain rate of interest. And basically, the more unsure they are about our economy, the higher the interest rate.
Yes, I mean, there are a number of things. I mean, first of all, there's the pure uncertainty. So the government says one thing and then changes its mind. So there's a U-turn there that the markets don't like. But also, I mean, it might sound an odd thing to say, the markets actually quite like the idea of income tax going up because it's better than the alternatives. Income tax at least raises a reasonably certain amount of money. Whereas what we're likely to get instead is what's been described as a smorgasbord of smaller tax measures. I describe it as a dog's breakfast instead. So lots of itty-bitty tax increases. I mean, you mentioned the mansion tax, the milkshake tax and so on. It's highly uncertain how much money these will actually raise. And what's likely to happen also is, of course, in the days after the announcement, they will unravel as people like me go into the nitty-gritty detail and say the numbers don't add up.
But this is the interesting thing, isn't it? I can remember, I've covered so many budgets over the years, George Osborne and his pasty task and this budget and that budget. And normally they unravel in the hours and days afterwards when people go through this huge big book. They go through the numbers at the back. And often some of the biggest announcements aren't even announced on the floor of the Commons. They're just in the numbers, in the appendices afterwards. And people, the cleverer, folk like you go through the numbers and go, hold on a minute. This is a budget that's unravelling before it's even been announced and finalised. But surely the Chancellor at this point must know, because things have to be sent to be published, to be printed. The OBR, as you say, have to actually oversee it and agree to numbers. They must know by now exactly what's in it. So when we're told that there's going to be a mansion tax, so people who own a property, £2 million plus, that they're going to get taxed 1% of the value.
She could still be making decisions next weekend.
Right, okay, could be that late. Which again does show a lack of sort of thinking through. There isn't as you said, there isn't a plan. It's just my God, we've got no money. What do we do? Mad panic.
Well, one of the big problems here is that the budget this year is unusually late. And I think that could have been justified if they'd used the extra time to come up with a proper plan that they could explain to everybody. But of course, the opposite has happened. We're still, about a week and a half away from the budget, and there's clearly no overarching plan. And that's really damaging for the economy. So already in the last few months, there's been no growth at all. All the signs are that businesses have put hiring and investment on hold. Consumers have stopped spending. The housing market is frozen. So this has real costs when she does this. And as a former Treasury official myself, I find this really frustrating. We used to have this thing called budget purdah, where basically everybody just shut up ahead of the budget. This time we've had the opposite. We've had all sorts of rumours and leaks. I think I've counted.
It's budget diarrhea, for goodness sake.
Yeah, over 100 policy options, I think I've counted, have been floated, and some of them have been shot down since then. But it's very unclear what's going to be in the budget. And even when it's announced, it will be days, maybe weeks, before we really know what the implications are going to be.
And that's the thing. And also this itty bitty, as opposed to when many of the, not just economists, but, the money markets are saying, look, if you're going to have to, deal with the actual budget and the balancing of the books, you need to do two things. One, widespread tax rises, so things like income tax or VAT, something that is spread across the whole economy and across everybody, and that's what they do in most other Western countries. That if you want to pay for your NHS and things like that, everyone at the bottom pays a lot more tax. But also spending cuts, and we know they couldn't even get through the most sort of cursory £5 billion in spending cuts on welfare. So the chances are them getting any welfare cuts through is negligible. But let's talk about the so-called stealth tax, and this is about the thresholds at which you start paying 20% tax, start paying 40% tax and the 45% tax, because a lot of people, it's quite complicated how these thresholds work, but we're looking at a huge number more people over the years previously and coming up who will end up paying much higher rates of tax, won't they?
Well, the first thing, I'll probably stop calling it a stealth tax, because it's a rather odd stealth tax. Everybody is talking about it. So, everybody will see loads of numbers on your programme and in the newspapers and elsewhere saying that as a result of this, you will be paying, £100,000 more than you would otherwise have done. So it's a very unsuccessful stealth tax. It's also one that, if Rachel Reeves does go ahead with it, she herself has described as a tax increase on working people. She discussed this option in the October budget last year and ruled it out, saying it would be a breach of their promises. So in a sense, it's just as much a breach of the manifesto commitments as raising the basic rate of income tax would.
That's quite extraordinary, isn't it? But an awful lot of people who, bearing in mind things like the 40% tax rate, that was supposed to be, that was for bank managers, rather than someone that worked on the till of a bank, isn't it? That's the thing. We're talking about nurses, teachers, police officers being pulled into that higher rate tax bracket where 40% tax taken on every extra pound they earn over about 50 grand. That, 50 grand, you're on, I know there are a lot of people earning a lot less than that. You'll say, well, I dream of earning that money. People on 50 grand are not feeling wealthy in large parts of the country.
And it's also, of course, at the lower end. You're right, something like 10 million plus people will be paying the higher rate, the 40p rate. But also, we're talking about freezing the personal allowance, the very low level at which
the 12.5 grand before you pay any tax at all.
Exactly. So a lot of what everybody would describe as working people, those, for example, on the minimum wage, will start paying income tax. Pensioners who are just on the state pension will start paying income tax. So
these are people who they've hit by inflation the worst, because most of the stuff that's gone up is actually the essentials, and they have to pay for the heating and the food, and then they've had a pay rise if they're lucky to allow for that inflation, and the load of that pay rise then pushes them into the tax bracket, so they don't get much of that pay rise, so they're still worse off.
Yes, stepping back a bit, you made a very good point about we should be cutting spending instead. And if I were the Chancellor, the first thing I would do, and potentially the only thing I would do, is cut spending, or at least make sure it grows less quickly. Yeah,
but then you're going to upset, all your Labour voters or the public sector workers. That's the trouble. And everyone on welfare, it's not the party of working people anymore. It's a party of welfare. Carl Hennigan, he's a professor of evidence-based medicine at the University of Oxford. A very good afternoon to you. Can you hear me, Carl?
I can hear you.
Oh, we got you there loud and clear. Now, I want to talk to you actually about there's two stories. In fact, Sam Armstrong just brought up both of them really to a certain extent. Climate change. According to the UK Health Security Agency, the public health watchdog, apparently fear about climate change could be fueling drug use, according to a government report. Britons apparently are at risk of being gripped by eco-fear, eco-anger and eco-grief, and their mental well-being could be damaged by difficult climate emotions. Is this an actual thing?
Well, I had to look some of this up. In fact, here's one. Solastalgia, Julia. Distress people may feel when the environment changes, possibly due to extreme weather. Well, actually, it poured it down last Friday, and I felt a bit distressed and depressed.
Well, yeah, as I was saying this morning at the beginning of the show, when it's blue, it's freezing cold out there, but it's blue skies, and suddenly you feel completely different. Doesn't everyone feel miserable when it's grey and rainy?
But here's the important issue here now. The UK Health Security Agency costs us about somewhere upwards of about 600 million. So if Rachel's looking for money to be saved here, I would actually say this was borne by Matt Hancock back just after the COVID pandemic. I think it's fishing around for work. This is ridiculous for it to be. This is important money that should be spent on the NHS and frontline care. And in the background, they're doing reports. We're going to talk about FOI. Somebody should FOI and say, how much does this report cost?
Freedom of information, yeah.
Because I actually believe now we have people in positions of power who are advising the government who are not fit for purpose. Producing reports like this just shows you what they're fishing for work, and they're wasting our time.
Well, and we're paying for it. We've had reports in the past about people getting all very hysterical. I mean, I've interviewed quite a few people that's Just Stop Oil lot and people like that, and I mean they're genuinely properly hysterical. And again, the Greta Thunbergs and the how dare yous. They don't seem to know a single fact about any of these issues, and one can have lots of knowledge and have an opinion, and you might be fearful. I mean, someone genuinely thinks, and again, I think if you have lots of knowledge, I'm not quite sure why you'd be fearful of climate change. But this report, I mean, the fact they usually say they've wasted your and my money talking about the mental anguish of victims who've suffered flooding, drought or wildfires. By the way, there's no evidence that any of those three things are impacted by climate change at all. But they said there is a considerable set of evidence suggesting increased risk of depression, anxiety, PTSD, suicide, substance misuse and violent behaviour, as well as reduced well-being and difficult climate emotions. And these impacts can be long-lasting, ranging from months, years and even decades. I mean, this is a public health watchdog. What the hell are they talking about?
Well, I think there's one important issue, I think, is young people of today know no different. We're from an era and an age when we would have just looked at this and laughed. It would have got reported on and they would have called this just on. But in the modern world, there's a sort of catastrophization that's going on. That to garner your attention means everything has to be hugely fearful. Yeah. And in doing so, we're marketing an issue. People need to dial back the rhetoric. But I think it's now starting to have its day because people just go, I'm switching off the news. I'm not listening to this. So if you're in the fear factory and the fear marketing, the public are telling you these days are over because it does have a detrimental effect on those who are anxious. But you're dead right to point out this is a real marker for Wes Streeting to say, look, here's £600 million. You could probably run the agency for about 50 and put 550 million back into public.
Absolutely. Well, rather more seriously, I would say, this same body, the UK Health Security Agency, I find this extraordinary. They are on record as saying that they don't want to release data about the COVID jab and whether or not it was linked to excess deaths. Now, you and I have discussed excess deaths and we discussed the COVID jab and what's happened abroad many, many, many times. But they have been accused of a cover-up after they argued that releasing the data would lead to, and this is mind-blowing, distress or anger of bereaved relatives if a link were to be discovered. So we, the public in Britain, are not allowed to know the data that could show a link between the jab people were, let's face it, bullied and lied to take in many cases, and it's possible link to excess deaths from the jab, not from COVID, because it might make us upset if it's true. That is an extraordinary stance for them to take, isn't it?
I don't think people quite get the sort of issues at hand here. But first, let's just say transparency is the antidote of conspiracy.
Always.
Donald Trump has now found that out with the Epstein files. He knows if he doesn't release it, they'll just carry on and on. So we have a system here now says we're using the Freedom of Information Act, which looks like a cover-up. Importantly, they say withholding the data that may link the COVID jab to excess deaths, said the Telegraph. Now, that's possible. And if we don't get the data out there, how are going to people interpret what's going on? Yep. Importantly, number one, the data belongs to the public. They're the people who had the vaccine. Therefore, it's important that they get the truth and know the truth.
And pharmaceutical companies have been given the data, haven't they?
Yeah, and look, this is an evidence-based approach. If you release redacted versions, you can aggregate or anonymise the data which they've asked for, and you can provide summary statistics. So, for instance, you go in 0 to 5-year-olds, here's the numbers. In doing so, that gets rid of all the issues about data handling. Yeah. So there's something wrong now at the core of our government agencies and what I call the establishment that is letting the public down. And if people want to understand the mess we're in, this is why. Yeah.
Because this is the thing, if there's no data linking it, and if the data is really clear there wasn't an increase, there were other things that were happening at the time, and that's why there's no link. Well, show it to us and we'll report. I'm genuinely completely open-minded on this issue. We know that all jabs have some negative effects, and if you give a jab to loads and loads and loads of people, millions of people, you're going to have some people who sadly are going to get ill and are going to die. But again, the circumstances in which people felt forced to have the jab, some for their jobs, and to carry on having a normal life, and the lies that we were told about what it would do and who it would save. But if that has caused excess deaths, we have a right to know, full stop, nothing to discuss.
I'm not open-minded anymore, Julia, because last year we spent 900 million on COVID vaccines.
Yeah.
We have a right to know whether they make a difference or not, and in what populations, and if they're harming.
And why would they not want to give us that information? That's the thing that worries me.
So they want to give it across the board. They won't let you see the procurement, the Tron contracts, how much we've actually paid for it. Yep. They won't let you see the data they're built on. From the first day somebody has a vaccine, we need to know what happens. Yep. In doing so, we now have a core problem. Yep. The public doesn't trust the government and its agencies anymore. And it's right to do so if it's not transparent.
And quite rightly so. Hello, Jason, what do you want to say?
Good afternoon, Julia. Thanks for taking the call.
Always lovely to hear from you, my love. What do you want to say?
We're on about our Home Secretary. A little bit bored of it now. It's every Home Secretary. Is it standard practice that it's just on the to read off? Yeah, you've got to mention immigration. You're going to tackle immigration. They've all said it. We've gone back as far as Priti Patel, and she was going to slam the boat. She was going to do whatever, and she done absolutely jack. Nothing's good.
I was being worried about where that sentence was going.
No, but nothing's going to get done, and I want to hedge a bet with you.
Yeah.
Right? I reckon we've got more chance of watching you on Strictly Come Dancing doing the cha-cha-cha than what we have of any Home Secretary in this Labour government actually stopping the boats and the immigrants.
Jason, I kid you not, a few years ago, I got approached by some of the Strictly Scouts at an event where I was dancing. They'd actually seen my moves. Nothing came of it. I was absolutely gutted.
And obviously what your sort of opinion are, because I reckon you'd have fell out with most of them on that show within about 10 minutes.
Why? Because why? Well, I've got friends and family who have millions of different... Unlike people on the left, I don't have a need for people to agree with my political views to be friends with them. No, I could do the old spray tan.
Spray tan. But yeah, no, I would like to see you on it, and let's say we had your bet. What's gonna happen first? You're going Strictly, or Labour government's gonna sort of stop the boat.
Bet accepted. The BBC are never going to let me go on Strictly. They're never going to let me go on Strictly. It would be good fun. Do you know, I tell you what, who could win Strictly? My husband. Great mover. Great mover.
Really?
He can follow instruction better than I can. Does what he's told.
Well, yeah, I was going to say I don't think you go well to being told what to do. But
no, it depends.
This afternoon, Julia.
No, there's a couple of those dancers I'd be quite happy to tell me what to do, but there we are. We'll leave that on. I'm a happily married woman. Jason, always good to hear from you. Thank you very much. James, let's take us back to some sense. James is in Devon. James, you want to talk about taxes. Small matter of the budget in a week and a half.
Yes, Julia, as a veteran who served in the Gulf War and did peacekeeping in Bosnia and in Rwanda, I've got to get this off my mind, because if I don't, I think I will jolly well explode. At this moment in time, we are going to be paying Mauritius billions and billions of pounds for something that we own called Diego Garcia, which is ours, and where the Mauritius don't have to pay taxes, their nationals, for 6 months. We're paying doctors and drivers. We're paying billions for hotel bills for illegals and for legal migrants that come here in welfare. We're paying energy taxes. You wouldn't believe we have access to oil and gas in our own land. We're paying billions in overseas aid. We're paying NGOs millions and millions of pounds to denigrate our country and our history. We're paying the police and the legal system to have a two-tier legal system over us. We are listening to Caribbean nations trying, at this moment in time, to fleece us for trillions and trillions
This week, they're having talks with the British government on reparations for slavery. I mean,
which is a joke. And we now going to be paying for other people's children after the two-child benefit cap is basically reduced. And I'm now going to be paying more tax. And do you know what, Julia? I think I'm going to self-emulate before it happens next week.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's just mind-blowing, isn't it? The things, oh, we can't afford this, we can't afford that, but we can just, here's money for the Chagos Islands we already own. I mean, it is utterly mind-blowing what they do. What do you think's behind it all? What's your theory?
Oh, Julia, I just read out to you something. I'm no professor, but I could do more than Rachel account. What I just read out to you here must be touching about £300 billion. We've got shale gas, we've got actual oil that can be pulled out. We've got an energy secretary that puts 78% tax on our energy bills and thinks we're stupid by saying it is the international market. No, it's what the taxes you're putting on from when you buy it. We are not stupid. I have had a goddamn enough of this. I want a general election. I want some sense in there. And I'm sick and tired of paying the expenses of these children who think they are government ministers. They think they're at university. I'm sick and tired of it. I could do a better job.
Oh, I think we can all agree on that. James, I mean, every word, mate, every word. James in Devon, thank you very much indeed. Like, what is the point of working anymore? And he's a man who's done not I do, sitting here yapping, a proper job, actually, fighting for his country. Thank you for your service, sir. Claire, you planning to leave the country anytime soon?
No, I'm only on holiday. That's it.
That's it. It's just the holidays. Otherwise, would you ever think of leaving the country?
Yeah, I have considered it. We have looked at other countries, but it largely depends on, could you work, could you support yourself? And
that's the question. Depends. If you're young and you're starting out, you do a tech job, or if you're retired, you've got a bit of money, you can leave.
But when you're in the middle and you're a bit older,
then it's difficult. Yeah. Well, the trouble is, 257,000 British nationals in last year, in the whole of January to December 2024, did decide to leave the country. Although extraordinarily, it was more than 3 times what the previous estimate was, which was just 77,000. Well, let's talk about this with former Office for National Statistics statistician Jamie Jenkins. Very good morning to you, Jamie.
Good morning, Julia. How are you doing?
Very well indeed. Well, I just want to ask, first of all, how is it that the ONS previously estimated that 77,000 people had left, and actually it's more than 3 times that? Did they just put their finger in the wind and go, we think it's... How did they come up with a number that was so wrong?
Yeah, so historically what we've relied on is, and I've seen them at airports, and people might have seen them themselves, when you're going out, flying into the country or flying out of the country, they would have people working different shifts, and they'd randomly ask people their intentions. So they might come up to you.
Are you leaving the country?
Yeah, they might come up to you at Heathrow and say to you, are you planning on going on holiday? And you might say, well, no, I'm actually going to work abroad. I'm planning on living abroad. And you would estimate the number of people coming in and the number of people going out from that kind of survey.
That doesn't seem very scientific to me.
Well, in back before when we had computers and all the administrative data that we've got now, it was the best thing that we've got. It's a similar thing.
We've had computers quite a long time, though. I'm going to say they only changed it very recently, haven't they?
Yeah, and that's what the improvements are trying to do. So they've been embarking on, and this predates when I was at the ONS as well. They've been working on this for a while to try and look at administrative systems of the tax records and looking at GP records to try and understand where people are moving within the country as well. Yeah. To use that data to kind of move away from the survey. So they estimated 77,000, and now it's gone up to the record number.
More than 250,000. And it is a record number of people living. And who are they? Are they retirees? Are they young people? Is it just all influencers off to Dubai to post silly pictures of their duck lips? Who are they? And are we delighted they've all gone because they're all work shy, waste of spaces? Thank God they're off the payroll. Or actually, are these the people who would have been sorting the payroll, setting up businesses, earning good money, paying taxes?
So we don't get the full breakdown of who they are, but what we do have is other sources of data which kind of indicate some of the trends. So if we just look at the numbers overall, we had a record number leaving in 257,000 in the last year. Now, if you take the total of the last 4 years, Julia, it's nearly up to 1 million Brits have left. But remember, some people leave, some people come back in. So we do know that overall, though, we've seen over 300,000 net Brits have left the UK in the last 4 years. And then we get people who then track kind of with wealth surveys. They look at how many millionaires are kind of moving away. And I know this is something that people have been highlighting now, that this has been an increasing trend. But we've seen over the in 2024, there's an estimate of around 9,500 millionaires left the UK. That's projected to go up to about 16,500 in 2025. And why is that important? Because people are thinking, well, it doesn't really matter. But when you've got kind of the high taxes that we've got, if millionaires leave and they're not investing in the country, and I know people have been saying that, they're looking to get investment in the country, and they're like, the way the Labour's taxes are, we don't want to do that. If they leave, and they take their business elsewhere, then that has a big impact on jobs, and we are seeing jobs falling in the UK as well. And another reason people will be leaving as well, Julian, from a business perspective, is the high energy costs. Because if you're thinking, actually, it's more profitable to move my business, say, to another country.
Literally anywhere else.
Exactly. So those are the kind of the factors. And so the budget next week, if the taxes go up again, it's probably going to act as an incentive to push more people away. And the Labour ideology as well, it doesn't really matter, you know.
Yeah, well, sod them. There isn't there? Like, sod them, they're not patriotic. But the reality is, lots of these people, they work really hard. They may have, come from nothing. I mean, I know an awful lot of people who've done very well in life, and pretty much all of them, to a man and woman, grew up on, bog standard housing estate, went to state schools, and they've worked bloody hard, and I don't begrudge them a second of what they've earned, and they're like, I don't really want to give, and often in lots of tax brackets, more than half of what they earn to the tax man.
And that is the problem, Julia, and this is why these record numbers are important. And it's obviously there'd be other reasons people are leaving. They've just had an absolute fed up enough of what's going on in the country. And I woke up this morning, the weather was quite stormy. Maybe I should be thinking of going abroad somewhere warmer.
I have to say, I don't understand people going somewhere where it says, I just want to move to Seattle. It rains every day in Seattle. Why would you do that? Go somewhere warm at least. And lots of people might just want a nice life. And you've got people, retirees, going, do you know what? I may as well having a nice life, on the Costa del Sol or the south of France. What's not to like about that? We can understand that. And we want people to be free to do that. But we also want to have an economy and a culture in this country that says, welcome to the people who are the high flyers, who are the people who will be entrepreneurs, who'll start jobs, create the big companies, cure cancer, do all the important jobs, pay a load of tax. We want to have a society that says that. And increasingly, we're saying, nah, don't bother.
No, and what's masking the kind of this figure that we're talking about, this big net emigration of Brits, is we are seeing net immigration overall. So when we look at the figures, the population is going up. So we're losing Brits. And what's happening here is we're getting people from non-EU countries who generally do kind of lower skilled jobs as well, Julia, or no jobs at all. And then, so you're losing kind of skilled people, millionaires are leaving the country, and people who are coming in. So it's not like for like, and that causes that economic conundrum, which I don't think is going to get fixed under this Labour government, but sadly enough.
No, absolutely not. And that is the real concern, isn't it? And of course, what's interesting with these figures being upgraded to 250,000 Brits leaving the country, it makes the net migration figures look better. Like, oh, actually, if we've had more people, in terms of we had a lot more people come to the country, but it's fewer than we thought. No, the same number of people have arrived. We've just had more people leave. But as you say, they're the people we want to keep.
Indeed. And hopefully one day Rachel Reeves will wake up and think, I need to change course because this.
Well, leave the Treasury is what she should do, but there we are.
Yeah, well, we had figures out, the jobs figures last week, Jill. I'll leave you with this one. The biggest percentage rises of job losses is actually in the Westminster area. So maybe we could get Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves to add themselves to the figures as well.
Absolutely. Jamie Jenkins, former ONS statistician. I mean, he's used to do the employment figures, the health figures. He understands the numbers, Claire, and that's the thing. And it is fascinating about how they work these things out and how just how inaccurate a lot of these figures are. And it's like, but even remember we had that, we discovered there was 800,000 people who net migration. 1.2 million people came to the country, and literally the Home Office went, oh look, you handed the sodding visas out. You literally were in charge of giving the visas to people, and you didn't know how many visas you'd given. That's terrifying.
But we don't keep records properly in this country for people who are very organised, which governments generally are. They're really bad.
Do you know what the solution is? You know what it is.
Go on. Digital ID.
It's digital ID cards. Tony Blair, where are you? It's always, if we had digital ID cards, we'd know, right? My thing is, like, how do you not know how many people have left the country and not come back? And how many people have entered the country and not left when they're on a 3-month visa or whatever? What is the point of you keeping charge and keeping check? Why am I queuing up at passport control when you don't keep a record of anything anyway? It's insane. We were inviting you on the show yesterday to come and talk to us about what's going on with China, but there's also rather big issues with Russia as well today. Let's take these in hand. But first up, extraordinary situation. The Defence Secretary John Healey this morning standing in Downing Street giving a speech saying that a Russian spy ship, the Yantar, is on the edge of UK waters, north of Scotland, having entered the UK's wider waters over the last few weeks. It's a vessel designed for gathering intelligence and mapping our undersea cables. A Royal Navy frigate and RAF planes have monitored its move. But he said, my message to Russia and to Putin is this: we see you, we know what you're doing, and if the Yantar travels south this week, we are ready. And yet we've got a Defence Select Committee report saying categorically we are not ready to defend ourselves from attack, whether by Russia or by China. What do you say to all of that?
Well, Julia, I mean, I'm afraid this is something I got into epic fights in the 2 years I was in government, because the reality is we are not coordinated in home waters. We have 5 different departments claiming to have different responsibilities for different bits, meaning nobody's got a responsibility for anything, frankly. We are not structured, and we are massively over-bureaucratized. And I'm afraid we've got a government that is simply not willing to take on the bureaucracy.
Well, hold on a minute. I hate to tell you, you lot were in power for quite a long time.
No, Julia, look, you're completely right. And if you want to make the argument, you're absolutely right. I was in government for 2 years. Various colleagues, as you know, for a lot longer. And in the 2 years I was in, I managed to bring in a new National Security Act that would mean that we can actually do people for treason. And we arrested more Chinese and Russian spies than the previous decade. But you're absolutely right. We didn't fix as much as we should have done. And there's no defence for that. It's just true. But at least we had people like, Michael Gove, who wanted to change things. Now, you may like what they want to change, or you may not like what they wanted to change, but they at least wanted to do it. This government has no interest in doing anything. It's waiting to be told by the civil service what it is that they should or shouldn't do. And they've forgotten that they're supposed to be there as the elected representatives of the British people, not as an extension of the civil service.
Because I've always thought one of the defences that cabinet ministers had, I mean, I don't think it's a good enough defence, is well, look, we weren't unaware of the full threats. We're not experts in this field, in any particular field they become the minister for, and you can get shuffled around. You're doing transport one week, defence the next week, and it's the experts in, the Ministry of Defence or the Foreign Office who should be, setting the agenda and explaining, look, you can't just rely on the Cold War dividend anymore. Things are more difficult. You're going to have to spend more on this and do more on that. But it seems to me that everyone's used excuses of, well, we haven't got any money, and we didn't really know, we couldn't get round to it. But at the end of the day, we are talking about a couple of decades now of underspending, underinvestment, and under sort of reform. And we've seen wars change. I mean, whether it's Iraq and Afghanistan to what's happened in Ukraine, we're always basically organising to fight the last war rather than the ones that are going to come forward. We know that war has changed massively in the 3 years in Ukraine, to have the use of drones and the like. And we are simply, according to this Defence Select Committee report, we're not able to defend our allies or ourselves. I mean, it's the first job of a nation state, it's the first job of a government, is to defend our borders. And as one of my callers, Georgina, just pointed out, we can't defend ourselves against, the migrant dinghies, let alone, it turns out, a Russian ship in our waters.
Well, I listened to Georgina's points, and I'm not saying I disagree with many of them, frankly. But one of the things that we do have the capability to do is to defend ourselves against the Russian ship. But
what should we do? When he says we are ready, they've been, a Royal Navy frigate and RAF planes monitoring and tracking the vessel. He says that the Russian action is deeply dangerous, and it's the second time it's done. If it's in UK waters, do we have a right to say, get the hell out?
It depends what you mean by UK waters. So there's economic waters which go out, I'm going to get the number wrong, but it's about 100 miles. And then there's territorial waters which go out about 12 miles. And it wouldn't be allowed in the 12-mile zone, but it would certainly be allowed in the 100-mile zone.
And it's just on the edge of that 12 miles by the sounds of it.
That's what it sounds like. I haven't seen any data.
So we can't blow it up. And I'm not saying we should try and start World War III, but what can we do? So when he says we are ready, what does he mean?
Well, frankly, what we should be doing is pushing back. We should be surfacing our submarines off the Russian coast. We should be making sure the Russians know that we're present near where they, where their territorial waters extend. So, okay, coast is a bit close in, but you know what I mean, Russian territorial extent. So we need to make sure that they're aware that we are present, and that if they start messing around in a stupid way, as they are, then we have the capability to respond. But it's, in order to do that, we need to massively change the way that we buy ships. We need to completely change the way that we run the defence forces. And, you're absolutely right. We had 14 years and we didn't do it effectively. And, it was a great failure of ours. But the reality is now what we need to be doing is looking at the technology change, learning off Ukraine, learning off those countries in our alliance structures who've innovated, and learning that you can sink the Russian Navy with drones, just as the Ukrainians did.
And much more cheaply and safely. I mean, we are talking about cost, aren't we? And we know that it has been sort of, was it a £5 billion increase in defence, but frankly, barely touches the size of the need. We know we've massively, run down our munitions supplies and supplies of everything, really, stuff that's been sent to Ukraine. We barely had enough ourselves, and we sent it off and we haven't replaced it. And there's a big the programme of building factories in the next few years, munitions factories to actually replenish. I mean, gosh, we should have these things ourselves anyway. But what sort of percentage of GDP, where we're heading towards 3%, even that sort of technicality, what sort of percentage of GDP and what sort of actual sums do you think we need to be spending today, now, to make ourselves safe?
Funnily enough, I'm not going to give you a number, Julian. I'm not going to give you a percent, but I can tell you there's quite a few things we could scrap and therefore actually liberate some of the capability. We're still spending on some programs that are, let's be honest, never going to come in. Never going to come in on budget, and frankly, they're out of date anyway. But they've got this sort of legacy, sort of momentum that goes with them because various people have bought into them over many, many years, and so we need to be dropping them. But the other thing we need to be doing is looking at, look at our welfare, look at our pension system. We are massively overspending, and if I can leave you with one message, it's I don't think people understand quite how broke we are. We have spent and promised so much that we don't owe £1 or £2 trillion, which is the sort of the public debt estimate. We owe something like 12 or 13 when you count up all the pension liabilities that we owe, all the PFI contracts that we owe. This is a huge sum. And if we want to be sovereign, we need to decide where it is we're going to cut our spending and how it is we're going to bring this budget back in order. And if we don't, very simple, the markets will decide it for us when they stop lending us money.
And they can at any point. And we know when the cost of those 10-year gilts goes up and the interest goes... A lot of all these people saying a few years ago, oh, interest rates are virtually 0%, let's borrow loads more money because it's so low. And then they went up again, and that's when things got really difficult. But the money markets could at any point decide that we're a bad risk. And at that point, we are going to be in a lot of trouble, aren't we?
Look, you and I suspect, have had the good fortune to buy houses in the past. Many people will be looking at buying a house, and they'll be looking at quite reasonably what they can afford and what they want to get. And some people will overextend themselves, and some people will be cautious. And those who are cautious when things go bad will find the wiggle room to stay and to manage. And those who overextend themselves may not be their fault, but
they've got no choice to get on the housing ladder.
That's absolutely true. That's about house building and something else. But those who are massively overextended, when the bank changes its mind, you become the victim. I'm afraid what we don't understand, or what we haven't fully understood, is that our debt, as in the people who are lending us the money, our debt is bought by foreigners. We are relying on the kindness of strangers to look at our country and think that we're a good bet 10, 20, 30 years out. Well, I tell you what Rachel Reeves is doing today makes that bet look worse and worse.
Well, absolutely. We know the record number of Brits leaving as well. But I want to ask you also about China, the original topic we were going to speak to you about before we had all these news about Russia. No, not at all. No, it's really important. We need to see all these things. We need more joined up thinking, in not just in government, but in the discourse that we have about these issues. Oh, let's spend more on that. Let's spend more on that. No, we can't. We haven't got the money. But in terms of this warning that went out to MPs, peers, and those like my guest clip is, or working in Parliament, from the MI5, that basically China is targeting them, and there are these two headhunters who are back into the China spy trial territory, large financial incentives. I mean, what is China's aim here? What are they getting out of these people that they couldn't, for instance, get out of just simply watching a Commons Select Committee investigation or read a report or here in Parliament itself?
Right. So what people are looking for, what the Chinese state are looking for, is they're looking for the kind of information that could get some leverage over you. Now, I don't particularly care. You can, my finances are public. My wife knows what I'm doing most of the time. It's not. I don't really care what you find out about me. I'm afraid I live a much more boring life.
I know. If someone wants to hack my phone, it's just shopping lists.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's who's going to pick up the kids and remember
Can
to
you buy milk?
I mean, it's Fine, if you want to know that, you can find out, but that's sort of it. But actually, I'm afraid not everybody lives as boring lives as we do, Julia. And so, if you can find something to get leverage over somebody, if you can find some sort of gossip that gives you an in, the old expression is you're looking for in intelligence, you're looking for a needle in a haystack. Yeah. Well, first you need a haystack. And what this is about building that haystack of gossip, of information, so that you can look for the combined threads that allow you to have influence over somebody. Now, MI5's warning was about MPs and people working in government. That's true. But let's be clear. I mean, I hate to say this, Julia, but people in your business, journalists, can be influenced to put out
universities.
Universities, businesses, for intellectual property theft. I'm afraid this is a whole of government, whole of society attack, and we need to be aware of what it is. So I'm very, very grateful for what MI5 have done.
But meanwhile, the government, we're told, next month, very likely to sign off on this Chinese mega embassy. I can see it virtually from my office with the site where it's going to be across the river, right near, cables, absolutely vital confidential cables leading to the city, right at the heart of our country's capital. And apparently they're going to sign it off. I mean, that's madness, isn't it?
Well, here's a question for you, Julia. Who do you think governs Britain? Do you think it's the elected politicians who the people have decided to be there? Or do you think it's people, it's a process thing? Can you imagine if we decided we couldn't build the docks that we needed to land at Normandy because we didn't get planning permission? Or we couldn't build the motorways that connected the troops from, Salisbury Plain to the embarkation points because, we had to wait 6 months for the planning permission for the roads. It's absurd. It's completely absurd. And yet here we are talking about an embassy that will tower over the Tower of London and have a huge symbolic impact on those people who want to invest or trade through the City of London. And yet we're saying, oh, no, it's a planning decision. It's not a planning decision. It's a political decision. And if you don't want to make it, get out of the way and let somebody who's got the spine to do it.
Thank you for editing yourself there. Tom Tugendhat, really appreciate you joining us, Centre MP, former Security Minister. Quick thought from Claire Pearsall on that.
Yeah, he's quite right. So we can't hide behind planning laws for something of this nature and this seriousness. You can't use that as your excuse.
It's very interesting in Parliament right now. A government minister has said, we will not tolerate. No, sorry, it's yesterday. Sorry, we'll not tolerate Chinese spying.
Apart from they are.
I mean, you literally do. Now, this time, instead of net zero or many other topics I've talked to you about, I want to talk to you about COVID. It's a long time ago now. I think a lot of people like to just wipe those mad years from existence. But we can't do that because, A, we've got an ongoing COVID inquiry. B, pretty much every problem we've got in society right now is a result of policies during COVID. And C, they'll probably lock us down again if we don't prove how mad it was in the first place. Now, this is a problem because today we've got a report out today from the COVID inquiry from Baroness Hallett, who's chairing that inquiry, into the government's response to COVID. And my guess is it's going to say, oh, we should have locked down sooner. What are you expecting?
Exactly that, Julia. And I think when this report drops, it's going to become even more obvious what a mistake it was to put this inquiry in the hands of the lawyers rather than the hands of scientists and people who should have been looking into this, because the lawyers have interpreted their role as a sort of show trial of the government of the day, and they've become preoccupied with the issue of the processes of decision making in Downing Street and Whitehall.
And who wrote what nasty WhatsApp about someone else?
Yes, yeah, exactly, that sort of thing. We've learnt loads about that, and not the least bit interest in perhaps the single most important issue is where did this virus come from? When Michael Gove raised that issue in the inquiry, if you remember, he was just shut down by the KC. I don't want to get into that. He said, well, he said, well,
where did it come from?
Are you interested in that?
But also the basic science. We were constantly told we were following the science, cap T, cap S, copyright, and it wasn't. There's no such thing as the science on any topic whatsoever, but least of all a new virus and how to handle it. We did, however, have pre-pandemic planning, and everyone thinks that Sweden went out on a limb and did a wild, wacky experiment that a lot of people think didn't pay off. And of course, those people haven't bothered looking at the stats, which show absolutely categorically without a shadow of a doubt that Sweden did better than anywhere else because they didn't lock down. But crucially, they were following the pre-pandemic planning that the World Health Organization had signed off on, that our own government had done and had signed off on. And we, like many other countries, our governments, our politicians, pushed on by the media and social media bots, just completely panicked, went, ah! And did the exact opposite of what we'd always planned to do in the event of a pandemic. And for some reason, people think that the problem is that we didn't panic and do it sooner, rather than we shouldn't have done it at all.
Yeah, well, there was a clear, carefully laid pandemic plan, which had been worked out over a number of years, which was that you didn't close down society totally, because it would be futile to do that. What you had to do, you had to manage things so that, except the infection was going to go through the population, but manage it in such a way that there weren't going to be huge spikes of infections at any one time, which would overload the NHS. So squash the sombrero, as you remember. Yeah. Boris Johnson put it when he showed us that graph of how the government was going to manage it.
And this is what the likes of Chris Whitty was saying only 2 weeks before we actually went into full lockdown.
Yeah, well, on the Thursday, 12th of March 2020, was the first of the Downing Street press conferences, and it was absolutely clear from that conference what the strategy was. And, you know, I said it was the squash the sombrero strategy, try to prevent the, spikes overwhelming the NHS. And not just Chris Whitty, but also Patrick Vallance, who's now a government science minister, Labour science minister, made absolutely that point. Now, over the following weekend, we know there was a panic, and Whitehall, the government, they did this about turn, and suddenly they decided that we were going to have to lock down.
Yeah. Well, Neil Ferguson from Imperial College presented some numbers to Dominic Cummings, who lost his mind and decided that 500,000 people were going to die of COVID if we didn't lock down. And suddenly we locked down. But you, like me, I'm guessing, thought, well, these people have been very sensible up to this point. And if Whitty and Vallance, who are eminent in their fields, if they think that we do now need to lock down, there must be new information that we weren't aware of. But there wasn't.
Well, the only new information there was, as you say, this Imperial College study, which
was utter nonsense.
Predicted that 500,000 people could die if nothing was done. It predicted 250,000 people would die if there was minimal intervention by the government, and their modelling said that introduced all these social distancing, a number of them actually short of lockdown. The Imperial College never modelled a full lockdown, but they said all these other social distancing measures, we could reduce the death toll to about 20,000, and that was totally, totally offbeat. We, in the end, we, a lot more deaths than that. The infection went through the population. Whether we could have avoided more deaths by having an earlier lockdown, I doubt it. If we could have. There's basically this was going to go through the population.
Yeah, I mean, that's
anyway,
it. And
a certain number of people were going to die. And as you say, Sweden, which took a different view, they actually fared better than Britain did and most other countries.
Yeah, but the thing is, they had higher COVID deaths in the first year. But again, some people were kept alive longer. But again, this idea that the whole population was at risk, including young children, they kept their schools open under the age of 16. No one missed a day of school. We, apart from Italy, had the most school closures, apart from like lunatics in California and America. I mean, it was just ridiculous. I mean, those schools were basically closed for about 2 years. But even the wearing of the masks, don't wear the mask, they don't work. Oh, no, you've got to wear a mask, legally required to wear a mask. And we know from a lot of those WhatsApps from Matt Hancock that were leaked and that Isabel Oakeshott brilliantly exposed to the world, that actually most of the policy was made on a complete whim, no science behind it whatsoever. It was all politicking, a lot of it goaded on by the media, who still, by the way, have not faced their reckoning. But I know you were a solid voice on this. Again, I was fooled in the early weeks. Thank God I was persuaded by some very sensible people to see sense in it. And I doubt, though, we're going to get much sense from that report. Now, often when in the studio, I have the next guest, young Tom Slater, sitting in the studio with me, giving his tuppence worth on all the news. Well, this time, he is in the news. He is the subject of the news. Tom Slater is editor of Spiked Online and joins us right now to talk about, well, turns out you've been cancelled, Tom.
Yes, and our documentary about free speech, no less, has been cancelled.
Indeed.
So
well, look, I mean,
the irony wasn't lost on us.
No,
definitely.
Indeed. I mean, you know, well, by an inclusive cinema chain. We talked about it on the show because, and again, you know me, I don't blow smoke up anyone's backside. I think it's genuinely brilliant documentary. The sort of documentary BBC Panorama used to make when they did good ones. They didn't just make stuff up that people had said about, you know, all the different cases of where people have been, you know, basically investigated just for, you know, just going about their daily, completely lawful business and be investigated by the police and really been quite, you know, had some pretty harrowing experiences. And you've delved deep and spoken to people at length. And it's an absolutely fascinating documentary. I do advise anyone to go and look at your website and your Twitter feed to go and look at it. But you were going to do basically a screening next Tuesday, I think it was, and you'd booked a cinema and everything was fine. And then what happened?
Yes, exactly as you say. We were going to have the screening and a Q&A for the documentary Think Before You Post. Everything was all lined up. Tickets were selling well. We were looking forward to a great night. And then on Tuesday evening, the venue, Rich Mix in East London, sent us an email saying that they would be cancelling the booking because the film and the event did not align with its values. So clearly free speech isn't one of those. They suggested that the content of the film and the speakers on the post-screening Q&A were not known to them. I let people make their own minds up, but the documentary was already out and all of the speakers who were booked to speak were in the film itself. So
I mean, these weren't controversial people. I mean, there were people like, you know, Alison Pearson, a Daily Telegraph columnist, an ordinary couple. I mean, people who've been found to have done nothing wrong, who just were exercising perfectly normal, routine speech that other people would exercise in their daily lives.
No, you're exactly right, Julia. That's a real theme of the film. Of course, we should stand up for free speech, regardless of who's spouting what. But one of the key themes of this documentary was that you had a journalist in the form of Alison Pearson, you had two concerned parents in Boreham Wood, and a former soldier in Wales who were all really put through the ringer, visited by police, in some cases arrested. In the case of Jamie Michael, the former soldier, held on remand for 17 days, despite having said nothing hateful whatsoever. So to cancel us and to imply that this is some kind of questionable exercise that we're engaged in was particularly ridiculous, I would say.
Well, it was exactly. So, I mean, when you got this message from this supposedly inclusive cinema, who do have some quite ridiculous things. I mean, on their actual on their website, they say how inclusive they are, but they informed you by email saying, since confirming this booking, you say it's come to light that the content and speakers featured do not align with our values and missions here at Rich Mix. Our founding objectives are to support marginalised communities, primarily communities facing racial inequity, promote intercultural understanding, eliminate racial discrimination and foster equality of opportunity through arts and culture. And the nature of the event, they say, was not fully disclosed to us upon booking, but presumably you said we'd like to do a screening of our documentary called Think Before You Post. I'm not quite sure what more you could have given them, but what have you responded to them? What have you written back?
So it's one of those things where our main concern is to find another venue, which we've been working flat out to do. They have offered to refund us the money that we paid up front. And I hope that, and we wanted to make a fuss in the court of public opinion. Yeah. They made this decision. We think it reflects an intolerance on the part of the cultural sector more broadly, to be perfectly frank. I do note that the gentleman who emailed us notifying us that the booking had been cancelled had his pronouns in his email signature, which might tell you something about the kind of atmosphere at these organisations.
But this is a cinema, and the Rich Mix Cinema is in Bethnal. Apologies, we've got a slide today. I do apologise. The Rich Mix Cinema in Bethnal Green, East London. They've hosted some other sort of, I would say, quite controversial figures in their time. I mean, some prominent left-wing MPs being hosted. I mean, they're quite happy to have Zara Sultana there, an event in October, Time to Stop the Far Right. I mean, so I think we know where their politics lie, don't we? But, I mean, can you take any legal action against them?
So it's something, of course, that we've been looking at. As I say, our main concern right now is to make sure this event goes ahead.
Yeah.
We've been
Has anyone got a
looking to find
cinema they
venues.
can screen their video? Can you get in touch with me, and we'll pass it on to Tom. But you should take legal action.
And many people have been in touch, and we thank them for it.
Oh, wonderful. But you, I mean, lots of people I've seen online have said, look, you know, it's a private business. They can choose who they want to have in their cinema and choose, you know, who they don't want to have. But actually, they couldn't say, for instance, we don't want any black people or we don't want any gay people. That would be illegal against the law. But is it not also against the law to ban people because you don't agree with their political views?
Well, this is something that we'll definitely look into. At the same time, of course, you have private venues as well within their rights to decide who they want to screen and don't. The thing I would ask them to is, once you've already committed to screening something, maybe hold to that rather than folding to pressure, whether that was internal, external, I don't know, I can only speculate. So that's really the issue here. Of course, they can screen and host whoever they want, but it surely reflects a broader intolerance if they're very prescriptive in terms of who they're willing to host and who they aren't.
Well, indeed. Well, we know a lot about this, but ironically, it comes as the Home Secretary Shahbana Mahmood has appointed Lord MacDonald to review how public order powers are applied online after a series of which she called egregious arrests. She said that officers should not be policing social media posts. This comes after, you know, Graham Linehan, the Irish comedy writer, was detained by 5 armed officers when he arrived at Heathrow. And I know who features in your documentary, Maxie Allen, who's a producer at Times Radio, and his partner, Rosalind Levine, wrongfully arrested by 6 officers in January over emails to and about their child's school. And they've actually agreed to a £20,000 payout by the police. And that's very, very clear that the police were in the wrong there. But we keep being told, we've had Home Secretary after Home Secretary under the Tories saying, police shouldn't be doing this. And now we've got yet another Home Secretary under the Labour saying, police shouldn't be doing this. It doesn't seem to ever stop the police doing it.
It doesn't, and the police are a big part of the problem. We've seen those numbers for arrests for communication offences shoot up in recent years. But if you look at the number that actually results in convictions and sentencing, that number is going down. So this isn't just a question of the law, it's a question of how the police are choosing to apply it and applying it very overzealously. Maybe it's going to take a few more payouts, maybe it's going to take a few more court cases to force the police to do what the politicians have failed to make them do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good luck with finding a new venue. Anything we can do to help, do let us know.